Hello and welcome to our tutorial. We are going to, in this tutorial here, just have basically I'm just going to go through what we have completed already in class. So we're going to make a 3D game here. I'm calling it FPS Run. I'm going to hit create project, and we are going to try and just going to go through kind of quickly if I can, but to show you all of the different steps that we completed over the full day in class. In the morning session we looked at the terrain editor and we created a 3D terrain. Excuse me, my voice is on the way out. So we'll have a look at doing that, and then in the afternoon we brought in a first-person rigid body controller. I made basically a very basic sort of SPS or FPS sort of setup, and then we used the script to give it a timer so the game would have an objective. So we're going to try and replicate all of that now as it all loads in, and hopefully we'll get it done in about 20 minutes. So the first thing we did was we created a terrain. So that's going to be my first port of call. And then after that we'll very simply make a we'll paint it and put some trees and grass on it. So here we go. So we're into Unity. I'm not going to download the latest version. I am going to, however, and I did this in class, but I didn't really explain it to you. I was going to turn off here auto generate for lighting, so it's not generating lighting maps all the time. And that was one of the reasons we were getting sort of a lot of visual changes in the terrains we were making. So I'm going to go add 3D object terrain. It's going to add in this white object here, which is, as we said in class, it's 500 meters by 500 meters, so half a kilometer squared. I am going to go to the inspector here, and I'm going to kind of make an island type sort of area in the middle. So, and then we discussed you can hold down the shift key and left click at the same time to kind of invert your work. Okay, so there's our island, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create a sort of walkway around the outside of it, and this will be almost like a little running track for our game, and we'll leave it like that. So I'm not too worried about the finer aesthetics of it. I'm going to select the light here, just decrease the intensity of the light a little bit, and that'll make things a little bit easier to observe. Now I'm not going to worry about the camera too much for now. I know I can't see it properly down here, but we're going to replace that in a few moments, if you remember. So what we did was we tried to paint the terrain, and if you remember in class we had a look at adding a texture at this stage, and there were no textures to use. So what we did was we added an environmental package, and we're going to do that again, and this takes about a minute to load in, and it'll give us an import pop-up here. So we could turn off a whole bunch of things, which would probably make it quicker, but yeah, we'll probably spend as much time going through what we want and what we don't want as we would just importing it all. So I'm going to import it all, and I'm going to color it in. I'm going to give it sort of a base kind of rock color at the bottom. I'll paint the sort of the walkway green, and just leave it at that, just to kind of give you an example of using two different textures on the terrain. And then with this environmental pack we'll have added in some trees, and we'll have added in a texture so that we can paint on grass. So we'll do both of those things afterwards. to get our island up and going. And then also in this package we have imported, or will import, some animated water, so we'll throw that in as well and scale it up so that it covers the kind of the outside ground area. Okay, so here we are. So in standard assets now, there's environment, and all of these extra things that we can use are in that folder. So we're going to go edit, add texture. We don't want a normal map for now, we just want a single texture here. So I'm just going to scroll down and I'll select this one here and go add, and then by default it's added to the entire landscape. We'll repeat, so add texture, and this time we'll select something, a grass hill. We'll click on it. Now it's very hard to see, but there's a little blue box around this to indicate which is selected, and I'll just reduce this a little bit and then reduce the size, and we'll just paint on green here. Actually, we'll increase the opacity of it, and the strength. There we go. So let's color this in green a little bit. I should probably have my island green and my walkway rocky, but anyway. And you can, as I said in class, actually make some quite elegant texture mapping using this. I've seen some really good ones, but this is just to illustrate what you can and can't do. So I'm going to move on now to the trees. I'm going to add a tree. Click on this little circle here, and then we get to pick what we want. And you can see sometimes they're labeled here for desktop or for mobile. So we'll take a conifer here and add it in. And we're going to reduce the tree density, and I'll paint this up the side of my mountain. I'll put a few more here, and we'll put one or two up here. Okay, so we'll leave it at that just because we can. And again, if you hold down the shift key, you can invert your selection. And finally we'll go over here to add grass and click on the small circle here at texture detail, and just be careful to pick the right texture here. So you have to have something like this here. It actually has a small thumbnail of grass in it. If you pick the wrong one, it won't work. And again, we'll just put that on this walkway. Now you can see I'm coloring in here to add the grass, but the grass is not being added. And if you remember, what we looked at was in this final tab here for the terrain, there is detail distance, and when we increase this, we should start to see the grass when we move in closer. So there it is there. Okay, so we've added in, so we've created a train, we've done some really basic texturing, really basic adding of trees, really basic adding of grass. So we'll add in one more object. So we'll go to water, and we'll add in a prefab here. So we'll use it daytime water. We'll drag and drop that in, and we're just going to give it a scale of, say, 2000 by 2000, and you can see down here we've got sort of water. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my main camera and delete it. And the next thing that we did was we imported another package, and that package was for characters. And what we're going to use in this is an FPS rigid body controller. Now, one of you, who will remain nameless, imported the wrong one, so just be careful you don't get the wrong one. There's two in the folder, in the prefab folder that we're going to look at. One is called an FPS controller, and one's called a rigid body FPS controller, so they look quite similar, and they actually behave quite similarly when you bring them in terms of they'll both move around, and you both have mouse look, etc. But one of them is a rigid body, so it has, you know, built-in collision and physics that the other one doesn't have. So we're going to go to characters, first-person characters, and prefabs, and then it's the second one here that we're interested in. It has this component here, rigid body, on it. So I'm going to drag and drop that into our world. So here is our camera. So let's just click on the move tool and move this back here, and then lift it up, and we are in the trees. I'm going to double click on it, so I'll center up, and definitely in the wrong place. So let's move this over here and place it somewhere closer to our path that we're going to walk on. Okay. Now, if you remember, what we did was we had a very quick look at this, and one of the things that we discovered when we pressed play was that the camera was quite low to the ground. So we're going to open up this and select the camera, and again just move this up so that it's above this collider here, this capsule collider. So when we do press play, that the camera's not running through the grass. Okay, so we've got quite a bit done now. If I press play, I've got a kind of rudimentary sort of simulation here where I can move forward and I can look around with mouse look, and if I hold down shift I can move a little bit faster. Oh, we've got an interesting glitch over there, so we'll fix that. So we'll select our water and we'll just move it a little bit so that it's not trying to render exactly in the same place as the ground plane. Okay, so so now the next thing we did was we said UI, add a text object. And a couple of things were added. So we have a text object, and we're going to rename this. We'll call this timer. And if I double click on it, I zoom out, and there is my text. It says timer. Now I can't quite see it here because I think the trees are in the way, so I'm going to move it so you can see my text is moved here. Again, one of the things we discussed was this scaler here. So by default it's on constant pixel size, so we're going to say scale with screen. So now our timer is a little bit bigger in terms of our text field. And so what I'm doing here is my preview is HD because my monitor is HD, so 1920 by 1080. But over here it says the reference resolution is 800 by 600, so let's change that. Now if you don't know what numbers to put in here, don't worry about it, we'll be doing that in class another day, but it is important that you get them to match. So that's actually how big the text will look, and that is the actual position of the text on a screen this big. So I need to make my text bigger. So by default the box that the text is in, the rectangle that it's in, is quite small, so I'm going to make this maybe 400 say and 100, so it's nice and big. So you can see the box is huge here. I'm going to move it up here to the top left corner. Then I'm going to tell my text to center into the box, and then I'm going to increase the font size. Now when it disappears it means I've made it too big. So that's fine and large. Now you can see that I've got cap lock on, and hence I've got my text the wrong way around, but we're going to replace that text in a second anyway. So we're not going to worry about that being incorrect. So it's going to test that this UI element stays basically where it should stay. So when I move the camera around, it's a UI element. It's on the camera. Now what we really want is we probably want to put a background behind it so that it's always visible. But we won't worry about that for now. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, and we did this in class, was I'm going to drag in a script. So I'm bringing this in here from outside of Unity. It's called Countdown. Now we went through it in class, so just very briefly, I'm just going to open it in Mono Develop. And I'll very quickly explain the script to you. So the first 5 lines of the script are just libraries that we're going to load in. So there's 3 loaded in by default when you create a new C# script, these 3 here. And then scene management is if we want to change scene, which we do in the script. And then we're using UI, so user interface sort of elements like text, so we need to load that library in as well. We have 3 variables. One of them is the scene that we're going to change to. There is this float, which is how much, this is our countdown timer, how much time do we have in our game, which is 30 seconds, and then this text field here that we're going to put this information into. Well, this one here, this line of code says the variable down is a float and it's time, and then we're saying time left, which is 30 seconds, we should subtract time from it. So as time goes up, so counts up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll simultaneously be counting down, so 30, 29, 28, 27. So this number here, time left, is basically our countdown. And we're saying we have text field called timer, and in the text field, so just to point that out to you, so this component here is the text component, and then in here where it says the word timer, that's the text field. So we're saying there's a text field called timer, and then our text component called timer, and then the text field in there put this number, which is going to go 29, 28, 27, etc. And then we have to convert it to a string, which is an alphanumeric value as opposed to a decimal like a float or an integer. And then here, very simply, we're saying if the time left is smaller than 0, so if we've run out of time, run the function game over, and the function game over says change scene, and we're going to change to a scene called change. Now, we saw in class that we could change this name. And then the only other thing in here is we're going to have collision. So we said if I collide with an object and the object has the tag end, then also change scene. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much because we went through it in class. Okay, so I put that script onto the player. The reason I put it on the player was because it's got a collision element in it. Hang on. Didn't go on, so we put that in there. There we go. So we are going to then drag and drop this text field in here. So this is telling the script to update this piece of text. As you can imagine, we could have lots of different pieces of text in our UI, so that's the one that's going to be updated by this script. And then finally we need an object that we can kind of collide with that will indicate the end of our game. So we're going to do that very simply by adding in a 3D object that is a cube. And I'm going to drag that to here, and we'll call this finish line. Okay, and this cube we'll just sit it into the ground. And cubes in Unity or 3D objects by default have has a box collider on it. Now this is kind of too small for what we want to do, so I'm just going to scale it up to say 10 by 10 by 10. So a nice big box, and we'll move that to there and move it across out of the way. And here's our character, so we're going to fall right beside it. So it's not going to be a terribly challenging game. So we're going to save this, save scene. And then the only other thing we need to do is make a scene to change to if we've won or if we've lost our game. So let's go File, New Scene. And immediately we're going to save this scene. We'll go Save Scene As, we'll put it in the Scenes folder, and we'll call it Change, because that's what we've written in our script, and the capitalization is important. It's a capital C there. So I hit save. So now I have a new scene. This scene here is called Change. It's in here. And just so I know this is the correct scene, so I'm going to add in a new UI element, a text field. You can see the text here. So again, we'll make this box a bit bigger and a bit taller, and we'll make our font a bit bigger, and we'll change this text to say hello. Now, we're not going to do anything or make that interactive. It's just so we know that this is the scene we've changed to. Now finally, in the build settings, by default the original scene we were working on is in the build settings. So these are all the scenes that will be in the finished compiled game. But even in the editor here, if we want to preview changing scenes, everything we want to preview to must be in here. So I'm just going to grab this scene and drag and drop it in here so that it's listed in the scenes in build. Otherwise when we try and change scene it won't work. So I'm going to go File, Save Scene, and then reload our original by double clicking here. And now I'm going to press play. So you can see our clock is counting down, and if we collide with this cube, well, it won't actually work because we haven't done a tag, but what we want is to be able to collide with the cube and then the game will be over. However, we have also said if we run out of time we should change scenes. So let's just sit here, and so we're counting down from 10. So when this reaches 0, time left will be less than 0 and we should change scene. And there we go, we've changed scene. Okay, so we know that element of the game works, so we can fail to win if we run out of time. And then the very last thing we need to do is this cube here, we need to tag it. So we're going to go add tag and hit plus. We gave it the name or the tag end with a capital E. So we have to go back here. So even though we've added the tag, it's not actually on the object yet. We've just created a new one. So we give it the tag end. We'll press play again, and this time when we collide with the cube, regardless of how much time is left in the game, we will change and therefore have won the game, reached our destination. And there we go, we have changed scene. Okay, so that is 20 minutes, so right on schedule. So that's what we did in class, and we'll be going on to do lots and lots of other things in Unity and making things more complex and more interesting. But there's a lot in this little tutorial here for you to practice and play with.